it's easy to see where the education piece is lacking when there are so few spaces like this. There aren't many vessels where you can have these honest, open conversations for that learning to sort of go that much deeper. It's very unique.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
Where are you from? Really? No, originally, where are you from? Can I touch your hair? Your English sounds so good. Nah, I don't see color. Those statements I've shared are just some of the daily microaggressions that people of color face on a regular basis when they occupy white spaces. Microaggressions are subtle yet negative racial messages that leave the person on the receiving end feeling hurt, humiliated, and even disrespected. You may have used these kinds of statements to start a conversation or even break ice with a person of color, but didn't realize the harm you were causing. That's why I've created a free microaggressions guide with 5 of the commonly made microaggressions in online coaching spaces that you need to know about and what you can do or say instead. Head over to anikishuru.com/micro to download your free guide. That's anikishuru, GICHURU.com/micro, MICRO. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Represented with me, Aniki Shuru. And today, it is such a special episode because I am bringing some of my students. It's a round table discussion, and this is the current round that has just completed Represented. And I have brought some of them back to talk about their journey inside of Represented. They all come from different backgrounds and careers. The essence of this episode is to shine a light on this work of racial equity, particularly right now when the media is not highlighting it. It's not something that we're hearing about. It's not in the headlines. But we know that when it comes to matters to do with anti-racism and racism itself, it exists, it is there, even though we're not hearing about it, and it is ongoing. And so these are the women, these are the business owners who are saying they want to do this work. They're still doing this work, even when it's not headline news, and talking about their journey as to why they're doing it, what their takeaway has been, and moving forward, how they're going to stay immersed in this work. And so welcome, Amy, Carol, Elle, and Dusk. And just to give you a bit of a picture of who they are, Amy is a bookkeeper, sustainability manager. Carol is from L&D, learning and development professional, has a cultural awareness that she educates in. Dusk is a trauma sensitive maternal care doula, educator, and peer support. And Elle is an online business owner like myself. She's a business mindset and entrepreneur, does entrepreneur training. Welcome, ladies. Just before we get started, I would love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which I am speaking to you from today, the Wiradjuri people here in central New South Wales, Australia. I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands upon which you are tuning in today, where you live, where you're working, where you're learning from. And as we share in this discussion today, we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So, Amy, I would love to start with you. I've seen your journey evolve over the past 10 weeks of being inside of Represented. And for those of you who are wondering, what is Represented? Represented is my 10-week signature program where I support online business owners to build businesses that are racially equitable so they can be intentionally inclusive. And so, Amy, racial equity is work you've been doing for some time. And so it wasn't new to you when you joined Represented. What caught you by surprise as you consumed the contents of the program?
I think how much I didn't know, and I posted about this on LinkedIn this week. I came into the course thinking I was pretty well educated. I am a big reader and I seek out diverse voices and opinions. And I've, like you said, I've been doing this work for quite some time, but it became pretty obvious pretty early where the gaps in my learning were.
Mhm.
And I think I also figured out pretty quickly that it was because you hold this space for these conversations and the vulnerability and personal experiences from both yourself and from others in the cohort that it's easy to see where the education piece is lacking when there are so few spaces like this. There aren't many vessels where you can have these honest, open conversations for that learning to sort of go that much deeper. It's very unique.
So not enough spaces to immerse yourself in this kind of conversations. But my question, Amy, following on from that, do you think that this is work that people want to do from your own perspective or knowledge? Do you think that this is work that people want to do, or are a lot of people thinking, I'm already inclusive. I'm one of the good ones. I volunteer. I have friends who are people of color. I am married to a person of color. I have children who are mixed race. Do you think the issue here could be that people think that they are already anti-racist and this is not work that they need to be doing personally? Or perhaps the spaces or the what they're exposed to doesn't feel like spaces that they see themselves being in, and the lack of safety, so to speak.
Yes, and yes. I think lots of us think we're good people and that we do what we can. And there are lots of us that know that there is more that we can do, and we're seeking the answers to what that is, but we just don't know, and we're not sure where to go to find that out. And I think what I've seen, I mentioned this in the course, what I've seen in anti-racism work previously was a lot of calling out, and that didn't sit well with me. And you introduced me to a new concept, one that felt more aligned with who I am and how I show up. So I think it really showed me how I can be in this space and be an ally and what exactly I can do. And I think people are looking for that. They I think a lot of people want to know how they can be good people, how they can be better and do better, and show up. And I think there is a lack of understanding of what that might be for them.
We'll come back and unpack that other doing this work differently in a way that feels more aligned to you, because I'm sure there's somebody listening going like, oh, what is that? I want to know what that other way of doing this work is, other than calling out people. Dusk, I want to come to you now, and very similar question to Amy, because you've been doing this work of racial equity for a long time, for over 10 years now. And through the course of doing Represented, something hit differently for you for the first time. What was that?
Mm. Ooh. I have gone very slowly in that time. And I think I have had periods where I haven't had to do the work because my privilege shielded me from the need to. And so I came into this course because I knew that I was shifting into a different place in my career where I was stepping into more of a leadership role. And particularly in trauma-informed care, and I was told you can't do trauma-informed care unless you're doing anti-racism work alongside it. And so for the first time, I would say in a while, I felt really called in again to step into the work. And I think it's the accumulation of everything, but something that was different this time was that, I don't know if it was how you presented it. I don't know if it was my readiness. I don't know how it happened, but I came into a different understanding almost of the tyranny of whiteness, or the myth of white equals good. And previously I've seen almost like, I've seen the if you think about that as a plant, I've seen, the leaves, I've seen the branches, but this was at this time, it was coming in and seeing the roots of where that comes from, and finally being able to say that thinking I am good, thinking that I am safe is actually the most dangerous thing that I can be doing, but actually in acknowledging the privilege that I have, the way that I can continue to perpetuate systems that disadvantage people of color and Black people, that's what this work has really brought me to, to my core this time.
That is powerful, Dusk. I want to unpack this just ever so slightly for the person who heard the word unsafe or causing harm, or that I may be adding on to the problem, and that white equals good, and they kind of set up, or they felt a certain way. Just to unpack that a little bit, because somebody might be listening to this and going like, what does that mean? How can I possibly not be a safe person if I'm a good person? Or if I have friends who are people of color and I interact with them and I'm respectful to them, how could I be somebody who is not considered a safe person?
Oh, I think what came up in Represented, I can't remember which week it was, but there was a live call where you were reflecting on the experience of women of color and how they have to adapt and, really check, is this safe? Is this person someone that I can be with, or are they going to, and it was about microaggressions, are they going to do something, where I need to put my guard up and protect myself from unconscious, often unconscious, and a lot of the time not unconscious racism. And we were talking about categorization and how whiteness is so drawn to whiteness, but that actually, I've been in experiences where I have unknowingly, said something that was a microaggression, and I've immediately seen that person categorize me from not being safe, like that this lovely person is not safe for me right now. And when we watched the documentary Deconstructing Karen, and one of the women who was presenting it, and the other white woman who was one of her close friends, the white woman owned, I won't ever be a safe person. I don't have to be in order to be in relationship together. But I need to own that there is harm that I can cause. And when I own that, then we can work together, we can be in relationship, but it requires me to own the harm that I can cause with my whiteness.
And to anybody listening to this and you're in the early stages of this work, this is just a blur. You're hearing this and you're like, I do not understand a single word of what is being spoken about. And that's why I want to come to you, Elle, because this is work that we did together back in 2022. So this is work Represented has been on. We've just completed the 9th round. It's been on for the past 3 years, since early 2021. You joined us, I believe it was 2022, if I'm not wrong, Elle, for the first round. And you did it then, but something made you want to come back the second time around, and you've just completed your second round. What was it that made you want to come back and do this work, especially when there isn't the, people tripping over themselves to do this work right now? There's nothing amplifying it on a global perspective like we did back in 2020. What was it that made you feel like, I need to come back and do this work? And just to add another layer to that question, as Dusk was speaking, you were nodding, and there's a lot that she's saying that makes sense to you now a lot more than in the beginning. You'd have been like, what is all this safety and me not being a safe person? Perhaps it wouldn't have hit home as it is today.
Yeah, it's such a process. When I came into Represented the first time, it was because I realized that I didn't know as much as I thought I did. I felt that I had learned a lot about race. I'd had some formal education in race relations, and but it had focused on something that, in my personal experience, my lived experience, was very arm's length, because it talked about poverty being a cause of disadvantage, and it talked about the knock-on impacts of education and housing, and it was all very intellectualized and academic. And that I felt that from a personal perspective, that's not right. Racism isn't right. But what I didn't appreciate was, even though I knew there was systemic racism and institutional racism, I didn't realize the individual way that every person within that structure perpetuates it. So it's not just about institutions, it's every single person who has the experience of going through life without having to think about the color of their skin is upholding something that is disadvantaging other people. And I hadn't appreciated that. But I'd had a false sense of security in a way, because I thought I was educated. And I'm surrounded by people, white people, who think they're educated. So I was never really challenged, because I never had anybody overtly racist that I was speaking to. We were all, oh, that's not right, that's so wrong. But it was always from a distance. It was always at arm's length. And once the penny started to drop, that my sense of, well, what if I say something wrong? What if I offend somebody? What if all this kind of fear associated with getting involved in the topic of racism, and even being able to say the word, or even being able to talk about whiteness, all the fear associated with that is actually perpetuating the problem. And it is actually the problem, because it's prioritizing my feelings of awkwardness and discomfort, which are really nothing in the grand scheme of things, compared with the suffering and disadvantage of people whose just way of being as a human has been, for some reason that defies logic, othered, whereas other people have been normalized just so randomly. It's, and I sit as somebody who has been privileged in a number of ways, very randomly. That doesn't mean I don't have the human experiences of loss and hurt and pain and guilt and all sickness, all the rest of it, but I don't have the extra disadvantages on top of that. It's not an either or. It's additional disadvantages coming from just inexplicable, random distribution of what's considered standard, what's considered normal, what's considered as being worthy of the power, if you like. And it's just, I can't believe that I'm at the age that I am. I'm a middle-aged person, and this is still work that is I've had, I feel like I've just had, the blinkers, because I haven't had to not have the blinkers. There's so much that I've now realized that I'm saying, I didn't realize, I didn't know that, I didn't think of that. And it was all because I didn't have to, because it never came up in my face as to all the stuff that I have to, that people of color have to think about, or people who have oppressed identities have to think about. And so Represented showed me that in such a gentle way is maybe not quite the right word, but in such a way that allowed me to walk towards it, as opposed to have it, be something that there was never a sense of you've done something wrong, you're shameful, you're awful. Any sense of that came from me. It was never something that was put on me. Represented is such a welcoming, open, safe space that you've created for white people to be able to address these issues. And that's why I wanted to come back a second time, because it's not a one and done thing. There are steps to get over. There's the fear and the awkwardness and the discomfort and the being able to say the words, and that's one step. And I would say that Represented the first time helped me get past that, but then the second time it was hitting different points and just opening my eyes even more. And it's an experience as a white person that I am so grateful for, because I don't want to unwittingly and unknowingly cause harm and hurt to other people. And I know that I will, as Dusk was saying, it's ingrained because of the number of years. It's all that we've experienced throughout our lives. So it's ingrained. We're not going to it's not a switch that if only it were. But once you can get past the stage of all the feelings that go along with that, and say, no, I need to do something about this, and recognize it might only be a little thing, but it's something nonetheless, and just keep going. And that's why I wanted to be in Represented a second time, and would wholeheartedly encourage anybody who wants to consider equity work to run towards Represented. Absolutely.
Oh, Elle, so much of what you've shared there is so hard to package and tell people this is why you should do this kind of work. Because as I was speaking earlier, Amy, and I'll come to you, Carol, very shortly, it's the idea that I'm one of the good ones. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not being racist. And so this work that you all are talking about, or you're signing up for, making time for, I don't need to do that because I'm a good person. And then you enter into this work and you realize, as you said, Amy, I just realized how much I didn't know. And for you, Elle, like you have the option to opt out because this is not work that you have to do. It's not in your face all of the time. You don't realize just how much of an issue it is and how much it exists around you until those blinkers are taken off and you're like, oh my goodness, how did I miss this? And I mean, middle-aged, and how did this happen? Yeah, and so it's difficult to package this and kind of put it out there, but that is why having this conversation is so essential, because somebody out there is listening going like, oh my goodness, that that is me. I didn't think that this is something that I needed to do, but as I am listening, I'm getting interested in where this conversation is going. And so thanks for that, Elle. Carol, this is work that's had your interest since you were a little girl, and it's led you to the work that you do in L&D and being in cultural awareness. What did you learn inside Represented about yourself that you didn't know before?
Well, thanks, Annie. Great question. I think I learnt just a much deeper and richer understanding of how ingrained it is. Like, very similar to the other ladies, I've been quite passionate about this for a long time, being anti-racist, but not fully understanding how systemic it is. And we talk about seeing the world through a cultural lens, but understanding that I see the world through a white lens, and the privilege that comes with that, and just the ignorance. So I think for me it's been a really special sort of deep dive to get a more solid understanding of, okay, well, how do we get here? Like, how did this all happen? And then how am I going to move forward to change things for the better in my world, in my circles, in my business, so that I'm not perpetuating that cycle, and supporting my children to not be a part of that cycle too.
Yeah, I know for you personally, Carol, this has been parenting side, the mothering side has been an area that we have worked on, unpacked, and discussed, and I'll come back to that in some form. But I want to come back to you, Amy. What are some of, perhaps, and this is a big one, it's a bit of a big question, but what are some of the discoveries you made, perhaps the bigger ones, as you immersed yourself in the study, where you looked back and thought, I'm in my late 30s. How did I miss this? And it kind of blends in with what Elle was talking about. But I know you had quite a number of moments where you went like, how did I miss this? How was I not clued into this? So what are some of those big discoveries that you had, if you could share with us?
I think for me is that it, like Dusk was saying, you can do the work over the years, but then you can put it down and take a break because life gets busy and it doesn't affect you personally. So you've got the privilege of being able to just walk away for a little bit and come back to it. And I think for me, I always like the metaphor that, a parent is only as happy as their unhappiest child. And I think I've always thought the same with a society. A society is only as healthy as its most disadvantaged citizens, and it's up to all of us to do the work to make sure we're lifting everyone up on the same level playing field. I think some people must be able to turn a blind eye to other people's unhappiness and disadvantage. I can't. I never have been able to, and so I can't walk around and live in the privilege and sit in it comfortably, knowing that other people don't get to enjoy the same benefits. But I think the learnings for me have been around what I can do about it. It's one thing to see it and to know that it's not right and to be uncomfortable with it. It's then another thing entirely, and this is where I've been stuck in the past, to then take the next step and take action and do something with it. And so for me, that comes with a responsibility now to make sure I'm not just reading and learning and consuming and taking in the information, but to, I think, just, putting things in place. And so for me, I really liked the module we did on calling in, and that it doesn't have to be confrontational. It doesn't have to come from a place of, I've done the work so I know better and I can teach you how to be a good person, because I will admit to anyone that asks that I know nothing in the grand scheme of things. There's so much to know. So I'm not speaking from any place of expertise or knowing better than anyone, but I like that, but I also like the idea of being a support person. So using the knowledge and skills and privilege, money, time that I have to put behind the people that are doing the work, that have the knowledge, that have the expertise, that have the personal experience, that are on the ground doing the work. Where can I be a support? Where can I help them, build their own independence and wealth and their businesses, their organizations, those sorts of things. So that's what I found to be so incredibly helpful, to take the knowledge and turn it into action.
Because a lot of people do get stuck in the knowledge, and the knowledge side of things, it is really important because it is the backbone of what you stand on. But a lot of people just consume, and it becomes like this addiction where you're just read what's the latest thing to read, what's the contents, and it becomes like this white gaze over what's going on, and you have that shock factor, but you still go back to your life that is a very different life and continue on, yet consuming, but not taking that action that leads to seeing that difference, be it within just your small sphere of influence.
Yeah, and I think it's putting yourself out of your comfort zone as well, and showing up, putting your time and energy and money where your mouth is. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to get some things wrong. You might upset some white people in your life, and that's okay, because I'm upset not saying anything too. So either way, I'd rather do the right thing and set a good example for my daughter and for others around. I guess you don't know what effect, what impact it will have on people to see you. I don't want to say doing the right thing. I'm not saying I'm doing the right thing, but just, I guess, living your values.
Elle, I want to come back to you. Thank you so much, Amy. I want to come back to you because there's something you said that has stayed with me, and that was, why am I the way I am? Because that was something that came up for you. You're consuming all these resources, all this information, and come back to that question of, why am I the way I am? Do you feel like you got answers to that question? Do you feel like you're beginning to peel that layer by layer to understand why you are the way you are?
Yes. And I think when I said that, there was a considerable amount of frustration and anger behind it that comes from what I said before about thinking I knew more than I did, and being both humbled and horrified to realize that I didn't, and that I had been oblivious. And it was that part. It's how on earth could I still be oblivious when I consider myself a person who thinks about things, and a person who's curious, and a person who, how on earth? And it came from that place. And I understand it, but I don't want to understand it in a way that accepts it. It's like, yes, okay, it's the structure of the society that I've grown up in, but that's not where it ends. It's the structure of the society that I've grown up in, but I don't want that to be the structure of this society. And so the sort of how can we still be in this situation? It's a bit of a question there's no point asking, because there isn't an answer that means anything. It is, as Amy said, it's the way we now act. And this business about being a good person, it's not that anybody who considers themselves not racist isn't a good person. It's not about that. It's about the fact that we don't know. You can still be a good person, not know, but you have to then take the steps to know. And I tend to think of the big picture a lot of the time, but with this, I absolutely want to just take the actual one step at a time. And that's one thing that you're very good at bringing people back to, Annie, is the take one step at a time. Don't get overwhelmed and swamped by the big picture, because that's so easy to do. And when you do that, that's yet another excuse for turning away. And I just don't want that to be my epitaph in a sense. She turned away. No, I'm not claiming that I'll necessarily be able to do anything spectacular or anything, world changing, other than every little step is world changing.
That's a whole sermon right there, Elle. You've just taken us to church and back. That is,
oh dear.
That is just how you've said that. I'm gonna leave that one there. Thank you so much. Dusk. What are you walking away with? In other words, how different is Dusk from week 1 of starting this work, Represented, to week 10 of Represented?
Very different. Very different. I think one of the most significant things that I'm walking away with started in the pre-work when you directed us to Rachel Cargill's work on white feminism. And she talks about how white feminism is white supremacy in heels. And it really hit me that, yes, I'm so passionate about supporting women and birth givers who've experienced complex trauma to navigate maternal care. But if I am not addressing the intersectionality of the experience of people of colour, then it is just trauma-sensitive care for white women. And what I came away with was that is not okay, and I don't want to spend the next season of my career investing in something that is just for that only one, set of people can benefit from, because then I am just continuing to perpetuate everything that, has brought us to this place. And so it took me from that really institutional place of going, well, this is understanding this is why this has happened. But actually, and the only way that we're going to change our culture, our institutions, is if we are all advocating for everyone. Because without realizing, so much of our work has been centered on the well-being of white women. And without intention, it has consistently excluded people of colour. And so I'm coming away with that realization that that is the risk of just continuing to work with the blinkers on, but also now with the confidence to name that when I see it, and to speak to that intersectionality from the place of a white woman, but allowing there to be a bigger conversation that is inclusive of everyone.
Mm. And that's huge. That's a huge journey from week 1 all the way to week 10 to have that kind of realization and to be in that position to feel empowered to create spaces where you're not just speaking to one group of people, that it needs to be as inclusive as possible. And I know you've been having a lot of conversation and dialogue with people in the health space and talking about this. And there's been a lot of interest around how can we bring this work of racial equity, particularly being more inclusive to people who don't look and sound like us. How can we do a better job in that space?
Yeah, absolutely. And people want to have that conversation. I think previously, I was too scared, or I don't know what to say, or it's not my place. I'm going to just get it wrong. But actually when I'm able to bring that piece in, everyone wants to have that conversation because they can see how racism is playing out in the medical system, and they want to have conversations about how that can change. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Carol, I'm going to come to you, and I hope everything is okay with your computer. What are you taking away from this work into your life and your business?
Thanks, Annie. Sorry, computer glitch. Look, I think just taking away more confidence to have the conversations with people and to share on a deeper level, do the cultural inclusion training. And I think I just feel more empowered now, more inspired as well, because I can just see the difference it makes in doing the work on ourselves, and just really unlearning all that stuff that, that social conditioning and those things that we've believed for so long, and really unpacking that and coming from a place of a deeper knowledge and understanding. And I think also, how I have those conversations with my kids to set them up, for a better and brighter future, being biracial too. And definitely a new level of confidence in having these conversations.
For sure. I want us to close this now because our conversations got so much more deeper in our group coaching calls. We would go on for like 90 minutes and just unpack things. And so I want to bring this to a close, and perhaps a final word from each of you. Amy, I'll come to you, and then Elle, Dusk, and we'll finish again off with Carol. What's one thing that you would say to somebody who is oblivious of this work? They're like, this is great work, it should be done, but I'm one of the ones who is doing good. I am not doing anything that is wrong. I'm not racist. And so keep up the good work, but it's not for me. I'm on the right side of history. I'm okay. What message would you have to people who are thinking that way?
I think for me, Annie, I'm not a business owner, and that was a concern for me at the start. I thought it would be very heavily focused on business owners, and I had my employer double check and make sure that I would be okay in the space. And I didn't feel like that at all. I felt like this was such personal work, and I know we all sort of mentioned that throughout, that it was so personal, and it has to be. The work has to come from our experience and our understanding, and what we can do as people going forward. But I just think it's such a unique space to have these conversations, and I wish there were Annies on park benches in every town in Australia having these conversations with people, because I think people want to have them. And I don't know, you just do it so well, Annie. And it's been such an incredible group to do it with.
Yeah, beautiful, Amy. You've all been incredible. You make doing this work feel good to show up and do. And it's work that's not easy. To talk about racism and anti-racism on an ongoing basis has its impact. It has its
Mm.
its effects, but doing it with a group of people like you all makes it so much more sweeter. It makes like I remember trying to explain to somebody that doing this work can be really, really joyous, and they're like, how is that possible? But you come into a space like this, we unpack so many things, and you do find joy in doing this work. Thank you so much, Amy. Appreciate everything you've shared. I'll come over to you, Elle, and then Dusk. Final words.
I work in the personal development for business owners space. My entrepreneur training is about building business owners through personal development, leadership development, business mindset. And so from that perspective, it sounds kind of adding to what you were saying before about the way that this work can feel good seems very odd, but it is such a positive growth experience. Yes, it's challenging, but it's challenging for a point. A lot of things we experience are challenging and difficult and make us uncomfortable, and there's not really much point to it. But this really has a point. And if you are in any way thinking, I'm not racist and this is good work and it's not for me, just think a little bit deeper, ask a few more questions, and give yourself the benefit of represented. Give yourself the benefit of doing this work for your growth, for your business, for your life. I think is what I would say, because it's more than you think it will be. When you look at what's included in the course, it's so much more.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. Dusk, it's been a journey, and you have a brain of looking at things so differently, like the competencies, the what are people getting out of this? Like, what is how capable am I now? How have I grown from all of this? What would you say to somebody who is just not, this work is not even in their radar?
Just that, if I think for me the biggest thing was I felt so helpless. I think we can get into this place of like, I can't change anything. I'm just one person. I've been doing this work forever. Like, I don't know what to do. It's so woe is me. And I think it's almost like that belief, like, I don't know if it can change. And I remember when I did, there was that really significant exercise in the pre-work, and I was like, I could see the internalized racism that I had been raised with, that I had soaked in my whole life. And I said, I don't know how to change this. And I didn't say this, but I felt so scared that I was going to get to week 10 and be in the exact same place. But I can honestly say that I feel the complete opposite. I no longer feel like I don't understand. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to take action. That sense of helplessness has gone, and I feel like, like I do actually finally feel, after, more than a decade of this work, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I finally understand what it is to be an ally.
Wow.
And we throw that word around like it's really easy. But I think when we sit with that, it is deep work, and you hold the space and you resource people to do that work, to sit in the discomfort, but to keep moving from helplessness to actually being able to step into what it is to be an ally. And it's worth it. It should be in every grade of school, this work, because it is essential. It is not an extra thing to add into your professional development. This is essential work. It's a non-negotiable. So I'm a bit of a fan.
Thank you. Essential work. Carol, bring us to a close.
I would just encourage people to dig in deep and to do it. I think it's an amazing opportunity to have conversations that are uncomfortable with a person who's incredibly supportive, and it's just been a really amazing experience to learn from other people, to hear the journey that we're all on and what we're going to do differently moving forward, and just how we can all make a difference in our own little way, and how powerful that is in our own circles. And it is easy to get overwhelmed, but I think just taking it day by day and doing this sort of work is incredibly powerful. So thank you so much, Annie.
Thank you, Carol. And doing this work in community, that's what enriches it more, because you get to hear Amy's experience, you get to hear Elle, you get to hear Carol's and Dusk. You're not doing it in isolation. And so if anything we've discussed here today has left you feeling like this is work I'd like to dive into, I would love to be in a community with other women in business or in corporate who are doing this work. It's a space that allows you to come as you are. This is not a space where you're being told, yes, you're learning, but you're not being rebuked for the mistakes that you're making. It's not a place to shame you. It's not a place to judge you. It's not a place to make you feel guilty. In fact, those are barriers. They're hindrances to you making progress in this work. This is a space where you come and you're allowed to make mistakes, ask those awkward questions, because it is through that asking, it is through kind of wobbling your way around, fumbling, and then finding your feet and then moving forward. And so if this is work that is of interest to you and you want to find out more, I invite you to go to my website, anigishuru.com/represented, to find out more about how you can join us for the next round, which is in September. Everybody, thank you so much for sharing your experience. Thank you so much for making the time, for being part of this journey, that we can lock arms together and we can make a difference, however small, but make a difference towards living in a world that is more racially equitable. Thank you so much.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. P. Mbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata.
Represented.